ready to start day 4. Here we go. We're going to need some watercolor paper. I got a 140-pound cold press. I've got some tape. I've taped it directly to my desk here. Then you're going to need a variety of brushes. I've got a flat brush for a wash. I've got my golden maple detail brushes. I've got a fan brush, and then my trusty number 8 that I always use. I have the watercolors I've been using all week, but we're only going to use a few colors of those. I've got some gouache already put in my fancy little meat tray here because that's what I use for a palette for gouache. And this is the set that I'm using. It is the whole bean gouache set, and then I've got some extra colors. I've got Naples yellow and opera rose that I've added in the mix. So the first thing we are going to do is mix up a nice blue color for the background. We are going to do sort of a floral landscape. So I'm going to get a little bit of my blue here, mix that out, or just get some of that out. Now I made this smaller than our other ones because gouache takes a little while. I mean, well, it doesn't take a long time to dry, but I'm just making it for time's sake. I'm making this smaller. So I've got some of my ultramarine blue, and then I think I'm going to take a little bit of permanent rose and put that out as well. But I'm going to make it really watery, really watery. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my flat brush here, and I am going to wet my watercolor paper all the way across, all the way down. And while that is wet, I am going to start picking up my blue. And I'm just going to do a blue wash here at the top. This is going to be for our sky. It's just going to be a simple sky. We're not getting fancy. Not going to do clouds. We are going to add just a tiny bit of this rose though. The permanent rose. We're just going to start that maybe here and bring that on down to the bottom. So we're going to let this dry now. Once that's dry, we've got that dry through the magic of video. I want to take my darkest green, and that is my permanent green deep in this set. And then I'm going to take just a tiny bit of red. And that is carmine red I'm going to use to make a really deep green with my gouache. So I'm going to mix these together. And I'm just going to use my number 8 brush to mix them. You can use whatever. I just want it to look almost black. I want it to be a really deep green. And that is exactly what we got, what we have. It's nice and creamy. You want a nice and creamy consistency. And we are going to put that as the background. We're going to make it solid across the bottom. But then I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with my fan brush that I brought out. But first, let's get this bottom done. With this nice deep green. Anytime you mix two complementary colors together, you can get a really nice dark or a nice gray, depending on how much or how light the colors are, the hues are that you mix. So that's a good tip if you want something darker. You don't always have to add blue to green to get it darker. You can add its complementary color. I am just going to speed this up here for time's sake. So what we're doing is we are just going to go ahead and put this really dark green on this background. It's going to be our base coat or our background color. Then I'm taking my fan brush, and you know how the leaves in a field, or the trees, the grasses and all that, once they get up from the, into the atmosphere, into the sky, you can start seeing little bits of sky between them. So that's why I'm using this fan brush, just to sort of scumble on. That's That's the term I'm going to use. Just scumble it on there, and so that you can see that background light through those vegetation, through those leaves. Then I'm coming in with my smaller detail brush. I'm going to just do some darker leaves, kind of trying to mimic some hollyhocks maybe. I don't know. That's what's in my mind. This is a very impressionistic painting. Impressionism is when you just paint your impression of something. You're not trying to paint it over realistically. You're not trying to get every little detail in it. You are basically just painting just your impression of something. So it can be messy and fun, and that's why I decided to do this project with you, because it is almost foolproof as long as you let each layer dry between the gouache. Then you should be fine. It is not going to be too difficult for you. We are not making like any kind of perfect strokes. We're just getting messy. Just whatever looks like a leaf to you, then if you call it a leaf, it's a leaf, daggone it. Once you put that stroke down and you decide that's a leaf, then that's a leaf. You decide that's a flower, then that's a flower. So you don't have to get overcomplicated with this. It can be very messy. And it's really good for beginners to try. Just remember, go a little bit at your own pace. Don't try to speed through. Let each one of those layers dry so they don't blend into each other, and you should be okay. Now I've got a little bit lighter of a green, so I'm going lighter. And of course, dark goes into the background. So when a color is dark, it's going to sort of recede into the background. Lighter colors come forward at you. So I'm going to lighten my green as I come into the foreground. And in the background, I'm going to keep it fairly dark, this sort of almost midnight green. I'm going to call it midnight green. I don't know what the color is. It's midnight green. It is permanent green deep mixed with carmine red. That's all I know. So we can make up a name if you want to. We're going to call it midnight green. So when I'm doing some leaves that I want to come forward, I'm going to go ahead and mix up a lighter green. You can lighten the green by using a lighter shade of green. You can use a little bit of yellow to lighten it. Now, if you use yellow, you're going to warm it up some, or you can use white. So I want to keep that in mind when I'm doing my foreground leaves. But before that, what I'm doing, I let that background dry completely, and I'm taking plain white gouache, and wherever I'm going to put a flower, I'm going to do a little base of this white gouache. Now, you might ask me why, so I'm going to tell you. If you paint a color directly over top of this really dark green, that dark green is going to affect the way that the color looks. It's going to make it look a lot duller. So if you go back in with a little bit of white, that'll ensure that the color that you paint for your flowers is nice and bright against that white. So here I've got all my little blobs. As you see, I am not doing anything fancy. I'm just doing blobs, just groups of blobs, clusters of blobs. I did do like a couple of cone shapes of little dots that look like little miniature Christmas trees. And I did the sunflowers up there at the top. I just put white blobs in those. I did do a few flowers that look like they have petals. I'm just doing a mix. It's up to you however you want to do it. I'm also taking my lighter green that we just talked about and doing some of those foreground leaves. These leaves are coming forward. That dark background color is receding. It gives it some layer, some depth, some texture. That is a good trick to remember. Now I'm mixing up my flower colors. I've got a nice sort of peachy color. I'm using that new Naples yellow, not New Gamboge, Naples yellow with a little bit of the opera pink, a little bit of white. And I'm just going, that's going to be my base color for my flowers. Going right over those white dots. Then we're going to let that dry. And we're going to decide what colors we want to put throughout this composition. I am going to go with this sort of peachy pink. I'm going to go with a lavender. And I think I'm going to go with a sort of a rosy peach color for my roses. I've got clusters of roses down there at the bottom. I've got some petal flowers that could be like cosmos, or it could even be daisies, not daisies, but like coneflower No, it can't be coneflower because coneflower sits different. But it can be any kind of flower that has petals that you would like. It could be vinca, could be anything like that. So now I'm going with a more of a pinky color for my roses down here at the bottom. The roses are in clusters, painting right over that white. Remember, let that white dry before you paint over it. So you've got your white and you're coming back over it. It's dry. You're painting in the color that you want for each flower, just the base color. We're going to come back at the end and add the details. Simple, simple, simple. And you want to make your blobs. That's what we're just doing blob flowers. Anybody can do a blob flower, but you want to make them larger, smaller, different sizes. I like to cluster my roses because that's actually how they grow on my rose bushes. Then I've got my hollyhocks sort of reaching up to the sky on those long stalks. And then I have some sort of cone-shaped purple flowers that I'm going to do. It reminds me of maybe lupine or butterfly bush, something like that. Or salvia. It could be a salvia. Now I've got a nice dark orange. I went ahead and put in a darker, not orange, dark sort of orangish yellow. That's going to be the leaves of my sunflowers up here at the top. And I am just going all around doing sort of just leaf shapes. I mean, it's just little strokes. There's nothing that you need to get too frou-frou with. You don't need to get your panties in a wad about none of this. You're just making messy, impressionistic flowers, and it's going to be okay. It's going to turn out really pretty. I'm just adding some more yellow here. I want to pull that yellow of the sunflowers down through the composition, so I'm going to put it in some strategic places here and there, and so that your eye sort of has like a trail to follow. Now I'm making up sort of an orangey peach, a deep peach color, and a lighter tone of that as well. I'm going to go ahead and make those petal flowers this nice peach color. Not the petal flowers. What am I thinking, guys? Gosh. I am making my hollyhocks, my other hollyhocks, this peachy, darker peach color. I want to have two different colors of hollyhocks. I didn't want them both to be the same. But I am going to use some of this peachy color in my petal flowers as well. But I may, adjust the tone of it, the lightness or the darkness of it, depending, or I might add a little something to it. I haven't decided. I'm going to have to get a little bit more white out here on the palette. White, if you use gouache, you're going to need a big tube of white because you use white for almost every mixture, at least I do. I've mixed it with my purple there. I want it to be a nice shade of lavender, and then I'm just going to do those tiny little dots, trying to cover up the white dots. It's okay if some of the white shines through. We'll just say those are highlights. That is the magic of impressionistic painting. It doesn't have to be overly realistic. It doesn't have to be overly accurate. It just has to give you the impression of what you're trying to convey, and that's it. So that's why I like impressionistic painting. I like just adding layers of different colors, not really caring about the details, just trying to get in the lights and the darks of things. So I'm going with more of a pinky peach for some of these petal flowers. I want to keep carrying some of that pinky peach color through. It also sort of mimics or mirrors the roses down there, although it is just a tiny bit more orange. Now I have added a little bit more yellow flowers. I've finished the yellow flowers down at the bottom. I'm going to come back. I've put brown on my palette. I am coming back into the centers of those sunflowers with the brown. I'm getting some of that dark green that we used for the background color and putting it in the very, very center of that brown, because usually the very centers of sunflowers are a lot darker, then they have like a little lighter brown ring around it before you get to the petals. I have mixed up a lighter yellow. I am just highlighting some of those sunflower petals. That gives it another layer, another dimension of light and dark and color. And it's really a nice texture. And I'm going to do that for all of my flowers. I am going to go ahead and mix like lighter shades of the base tone and just do tiny little dots here and there, tiny little shapes across the flowers. so that it gives it more highlights and more dimension. I'm telling you, this is easy. Don't be scared. Just jump right in. Now I've got a little bit darker mix for my hollyhocks here, and I'm just doing sort of little swirls in the middle. You know, hollyhocks, they can, they just have a lot of little petal, not little petals, but their petals are sort of clumped together. So I'm just doing like the center is usually darker on a hollyhock, and then it gets lighter toward the edges of the petals. So I'm just basically concentrating that color right in the center of those hollyhocks. Now I'm going to do a little bit of a lighter peach color and do some highlights on there, just getting it a little bit lighter. You could even use white, pure white as your highlight, and that's what I'm going to eventually do toward the end of this, is just get white. Here we go. I'm just getting some whites, just almost pure white, and just dotting it here and there, and that gives it the really bright highlights. And as you see, the flowers are starting to come together as you're just adding a little bit of shade, shadow here and there. You're not even doing like, you're just doing scribbles. You're just scribbling your brush in the center of these hollyhocks with a darker color, just sort of swirling it around, letting some of that base color shine through. Then we're going to go in with a lighter color to add some of the highlights. Again, we're just doing a little tapping the brushes, just little tiny little brush marks of color. We're not getting too too frou-frou with it. We're just being messy and fun and relaxing and not even worrying about being too realistic. And that is so freeing. So I want you to just have fun with this project. It's really not that difficult. It's just a matter of layering from dark to light. We're starting with our dark colors, and then we're layering our lighter colors on top of that, and then even lighter colors. And doing it that way gives you the depth that you need and all of the variety of color that you need. So on these roses, I'm doing the same thing. I'm just doing darker centers, and I'm just I went to the smallest brush that I have. It's a size 0. And I am just doing little swirls in the middle of those roses with the darker color. And then of course you can come back once that dries a little bit with an even paler pink or an almost white. And that will give that good variety of values, lights to darks. So that's all you have to do there. Now I'm coming into the petal flowers. I'm going in with that deeper burnt orange color, just going around the centers, just here and there, darkening those centers up. Doing the same thing with those yellow petal flowers. I'm getting more of a yellow orange, a darker yellow orange, and putting those around the petal flowers, just around the center, just giving it some shadows in there. And I'm just dotting it. I'm not doing a whole lot of anything, special. I'm just dotting paint onto it. Going up there to the lighter, paler yellow, and putting a little bit of that orangey yellow in those as well. I'm coming back, mixing an even lighter purple, lighter lavender, and hitting those highlights on those purple flowers, those flowers that are like little Christmas trees, little cone-shaped flowers. Like I said, it could be butterfly bush, could be salvia, be whatever you want it to be. You don't have to use the colors that I've used. You can use whatever color palette you'd like. I just wanted it to look like a big riot of flowers out in a field, maybe like a cottage garden. You know how cottage gardens aren't really manicured. They're just a big riot of blossoms and blooms everywhere. So now I am coming in there and darkening up the very center of that sunflower again. Now I'm making some really pale pink with my white, almost white, adding more highlights. It's up to you how much you do. I could leave it right here and it'd be fine, but I'm adding just a little bit more white highlights to some of those flowers. And then we're probably going to take this tape off, and I think I'm going to let some of those flowers just sort of flow off the paper. Once I get all of these little highlights in the way that I would like them, let it dry a little bit. But I really hope you try, if you have gouache, I really hope you try this. Do your watercolor background. The only thing I'm sad about that I did with this painting is the beautiful, the beautiful sort of skyline that I did that had that nice rose. I've covered up almost all of the rose with my flowers. So maybe next time I will make my flowers start down a little bit lower so that you can actually see that beautiful watercolor skyline or horizon line. Now I'm taking my tape off, let it dry just a little bit, and then I'm just going to come and do random leaves like coming right out of, you don't have to do this. This is optional, but I'm going to do random leaf shapes just coming straight off into that margin there and just work my way around. I might put a few flowers out there in the margin if I feel like it. I don't know. But that just sort of breaks up that square line and gives it even a little bit more interest. Now, if you make your border even wider, of course, you can go further outside of that border and it could be really a nice design choice. Really beautiful. I'm bringing my hollyhock at the top. I'm bringing it out of the picture plane right into the border, and then I'm just going to work around and do more and more little flowers here and there. And I'm just putting different types of leaf shapes just sort of jutting out from, from that picture plane into the border, and I've brought some of those purple flowers down into the border, and that's basically all I'm doing. I'm not doing a whole lot more to it. I think this is a cute little whimsical cottage garden type painting. Of course, you could again change it to make it any way that you want, use any kind of flowers that you want. Just don't get too caught up in the details. You just want to think about dark for the base, go a little bit lighter, mid-tone for the mid ground, and then for the foreground go a little bit lighter. And there we go. It is done. I appreciate y'all coming to day 4. I will see you again tomorrow on day 5, and we will finally be finished with our challenge. I want to give a great shout out to all my patrons, because without y'all, my channel would not happen. Thank you so much.